They say thunder always follows lightning. But what happens when the thunder is silent? When the storm rages inside corporate walls, behind closed doors, in whispered conversations and stolen glances. My name is Maya, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the most powerful thunder isn't heard, it's felt. And sometimes it changes everything. What I'm about to tell you happened just 2 years ago, but it feels like a lifetime. It's a story about power, about love, about standing up when everything inside you wants to fall down. It's about discovering that your voice, even when it shakes, can shatter glass ceilings and topple empires built on fear. But before we dive into the storm, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now. Because this story, our story, is just beginning, and you're going to want to follow every twist, every revelation, every moment that changed not just my life, but the lives of countless others who were waiting for someone to speak their truth. Are you ready? Because once I start telling you about Mr. Thompson, about Jasmine, about the choice that cost me everything and gave me everything, there's no going back. Let me paint you a picture of who I was before everything changed. Picture this. 20th floor of a gleaming corporate tower in downtown Chicago. Floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind that make you feel like you're flying above the world. That was my office, well, my cubicle with a view anyway. I was Maya Chin, Senior Marketing Manager at Pinnacle Dynamics. Sounds impressive, right? And it was. I'd clawed my way up from an intern who fetched coffee to someone who actually mattered in those boardroom meetings. 5 years of 60-hour weeks, of proving myself over and over again, of being the first one in and the last one out. But here's what the LinkedIn profile didn't say. I was also the woman who kept rainbow pins hidden in her desk drawer. The one who changed pronouns when talking about weekend plans. The one who lived 2 lives because in corporate America, even in 2022, some battles still felt too risky to fight. Until I met Jasmine. Jasmine Rodriguez joined our communications team on a rainy Tuesday in March. She walked into that office like she owned the place, not arrogant, just confident, authentic. She had this way of tilting her head when she listened to you, like every word you said actually mattered. And when she smiled, God, when she smiled, it was like the sun breaking through those gray Chicago clouds. The first time we had lunch together, she mentioned her ex-girlfriend so casually, so naturally, that I nearly choked on my sandwich. Not because I was shocked, but because I was envious. Here was someone who could just be herself, completely and unapologetically. "You okay?" she asked, handing me a napkin. "Yeah, I managed." It's nice to meet someone so open. She studied my face for a moment, and I swear she could see right through me. "Sometimes hiding takes more energy than just being yourself," she said quietly. That was the moment I knew I was in trouble. The good kind of trouble. 3 months. That's how long it took for my carefully constructed walls to come tumbling down. Jasmine had this way of asking questions that made you want to answer them honestly. She'd find me working late, bring me coffee, and somehow we'd end up talking about everything. Our dreams, our fears, our families who loved us but didn't always understand us. The night I finally told her about those rainbow pins in my drawer, she didn't say anything at first. She just reached across my desk and opened that drawer, pulled out the little enamel pin with the progress flag, and fastened it to my blazer. "There," she said, stepping back to admire her work. "Now you look complete." I wanted to take it off immediately. What if someone saw? What if it got back to Mr. Thompson? What if? But Jasmine's hand covered mine before I could reach for the pin. "Maya," she said, and the way she said my name made my heart do something complicated in my chest. "When was the last time you felt free?" I couldn't answer that question. I wasn't sure I ever had. Our first kiss happened in the supply closet of all places. Cliché, I know, but sometimes clichés happen for a reason. It was after the office Christmas party, and we'd both stayed late to clean up. She was reaching for printer paper on the top shelf, and I was helping her, And suddenly we were closer than we'd ever been, and she turned around, and I'd kissed people before, obviously. But this was different. This felt like coming home to a place I'd never been but had always been searching for. "Is this okay?" she whispered against my lips. I answered by kissing her again. For 6 beautiful months, we were a secret. Not because we were ashamed, but because I was terrified. Terrified of losing the job I'd worked so hard for. Terrified of the looks, the whispers, the way everything would change. But Jasmine was patient. She never pushed, never demanded more than I could give. She just loved me, quietly and completely, in stolen moments and whispered conversations and text messages that made me smile during boring meetings. We were careful. Or so I thought. Now let me tell you about Richard Thompson. 53 years old, married with 2 kids he never talked about, and the kind of man who thought a corner office gave him the right to treat people like they were his personal property. Mr. Thompson, he insisted everyone call him Mr. Thompson, had been my boss for 3 years. He was the kind of manager who took credit for your successes and made sure everyone knew about your failures. But I'd learned to navigate his ego, stroke it when necessary, avoid his bad moods, and generally stay under his radar. What I didn't know was that I hadn't been under his radar at all. It started small, the way these things always do. Comments about my appearance that lasted just a beat too long. "You look nice today, Maya. That color brings out your eyes." Compliments that felt more like evaluations. Then came the touching. A hand on my shoulder during meetings that lingered. His palm on my lower back when he'd lean over to look at my computer screen. Each incident isolated, each one deniable, each one making my skin crawl just a little more. I told myself I was overreacting. This was just how he was with everyone, right? Professional but friendly. Except, when I watched him interact with male colleagues, I noticed he kept his hands to himself. The worst part? He was actually good at his job. Pinnacle Dynamics' marketing revenue had increased by 30% under his leadership. He brought in major clients, commanded respect in boardrooms, and had this way of making even the most skeptical executives believe in his vision. That's the thing about predators in professional settings. They're rarely the cartoon villains you expect. They're often successful, charming, the kind of people who everyone says are great guys because they're good at compartmentalizing. They save their darkness for moments when there are no witnesses, no cameras, no consequences. But I was about to learn that Mr. Thompson's darkness was deeper than I could have ever imagined. February 14th. Valentine's Day. Ironic, considering what was about to unfold. I woke up that morning feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My head was pounding, my throat felt like sandpaper, and every muscle in my body ached. The flu had been making its rounds through the office, and apparently, it was my turn. Jasmine was already dressed for work, looking absolutely stunning in this navy blue dress that made her eyes look like starlight. She took one look at me and frowned. "Oh, baby, you look terrible." "Thanks," I croaked. Just what every girl wants to hear on Valentine's Day. She sat on the edge of the bed and felt my forehead with the back of her hand. "You're burning up. You're not going to work today." "I have the Morrison presentation, which I can handle," she interrupted firmly. "Maya, you need to rest. The world won't end if you take a sick day." I wanted to argue, but another wave of nausea convinced me she was right. I called in sick for the first time in over a year, and Jasmine promised to cover my morning meetings and check in on me later. What I didn't know was that Mr. Thompson had been waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity. You see, while I'd been carefully maintaining my professional distance from him, he'd been watching, studying. And he'd noticed the way Jasmine and I looked at each other, the way we found excuses to work late together, the way we developed our own little language of shared glances and inside jokes. He'd figured out our secret, and now he was about to use it as a weapon. That afternoon, while I was at home delirious with fever, Mr. Thompson called Jasmine into his office. Alone. I didn't find out what happened until later that evening, when Jasmine came home looking like she'd seen a ghost. She was shaking, actually trembling, when she walked through our apartment door. "Maya?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "We need to talk." I knew immediately that something was wrong. Jasmine was one of the strongest people I'd ever met, but she looked fragile, like she might shatter if I spoke too loudly. She sat down on our couch, wrapped her arms around herself, and told me everything. "He asked me to stay after the Morrison meeting," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Said he wanted to discuss some new project opportunities. So I went to his office around 5:30 after most people had left. I felt ice forming in my stomach, but I stayed quiet, let her continue. At first, it seemed normal. He was asking about my background, my career goals, what I wanted to accomplish at Pinnacle. But then, she paused, closed her eyes. Then he started asking about you. Me? About our relationship. About how close we'd become. He said he'd noticed how much time we spent together, how we seemed to have this special connection." Her hands were clenched into fists now. "Maya, he knew. Somehow, he knew about us." The fever I'd been fighting all day suddenly felt cold compared to the chill running down my spine. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing at first. I tried to play dumb, said we were just good friends and colleagues. But he kept pressing, kept asking more specific questions. And then, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. Then he stood up and walked around his desk. He came up behind my chair and put his hands on my shoulders. Started massaging them. Said I looked tense, that I needed to relax. His hands were moving down, and I tried to stand up, but he pushed me back into the chair. My vision was starting to blur with rage, but I forced myself to stay calm, to listen. He leaned down and whispered in my ear that he understood how hard it must be for someone like me, his exact words, to find acceptance in a corporate environment. That he could be very understanding, very accommodating if I was willing to be flexible about certain things. Jesus Christ, Jasmine. When I tried to leave, he blocked the door. Said that maybe I was misunderstanding him, that he was just trying to help. That advancement opportunities for people in my situation were rare, and I should think carefully about throwing away such a generous offer. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. I finally managed to get past him and get out of there, but Maya, the way he looked at me, like I was something he could just take whenever he wanted. I pulled her into my arms, felt her body shaking against mine. And in that moment, my fever broke, not from the medicine, but from the pure, burning rage that was consuming me from the inside out. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The woman I loved had been violated, threatened, reduced to an object in some sick power play, and I'd been helpless to protect her. By morning, my fever was gone, but something else had taken its place. A cold, calculating fury that made my hands steady and my mind crystal clear. I got dressed in my most professional outfit, the black power suit that made me feel invincible, and drove to the office with one singular purpose. I was going to destroy Richard Thompson. But before I continue with this confrontation that changed everything, I need you to do something. If this story is hitting you in your chest, if you're feeling that familiar anger at injustice, that recognition of battles you fought or are still fighting, hit that subscribe button. Share this video. Because the story I'm about to tell you isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who's ever been told to stay quiet, to not make waves, to accept the unacceptable. Now, back to that Thursday morning that changed my life forever. I walked into Pinnacle Dynamics at exactly 8 a.m., marched straight past reception, past the cubicles where my colleagues were just settling in with their morning coffee, and knocked on Mr. Thompson's office door. "Come in," his voice called out, cheerful and oblivious. I opened the door and stepped inside, closing it firmly behind me. He looked up from his computer with that practiced smile, the one he used when he was about to ask for a favor or deliver bad news. "Maya, feeling better? You missed quite a day yesterday. We need to talk about what happened with Jasmine." The smile faltered. Just for a second, but I caught it. "I'm sorry, what?" "Yesterday evening. Your meeting with Jasmine Rodriguez. The one where you sexually harassed her and threatened her job security. He leaned back in his chair, and I watched his expression shift from confusion to calculation to something that looked almost like amusement. Maya, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Jasmine and I had a perfectly professional conversation about potential career opportunities. If she somehow got the wrong impression, don't. The word came out sharper than I intended. Don't you dare try to gaslight me or her. I know exactly what you did. He stood up slowly, walked around his desk, the same predatory movement Jasmine had described, and I felt every muscle in my body tense. You know, he said, his voice dropping to that same whisper Jasmine had described, I've been watching you, Maya. Watching how you interact with Ms. Rodriguez. Very intimate for just colleagues, wouldn't you say? My heart was pounding, but I held my ground. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You and Jasmine have been having an inappropriate relationship in the workplace. Spending excessive time together, displaying unprofessional behavior, creating a distraction for other employees. That's not, it is, he interrupted, and now his mask was completely off. This was the real Richard Thompson, the predator who'd been hiding behind professional courtesy for years. And frankly, Maya, I'm disappointed. I thought you understood how things work here. How they work in the real world. Enlighten me. He smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. People like you, people with alternative lifestyles, you need allies in positions like mine. You need someone who's willing to overlook certain irregularities in exchange for discretion and cooperation. The room was spinning, but not from fever this time. From pure, undiluted rage. Are you blackmailing me? I'm offering you a choice, Maya. You can continue to make a big deal out of what was clearly a misunderstanding with Ms. Rodriguez, and I can make your life here very difficult. Your alternative lifestyle, your unprofessional behavior, your recent performance issues. I don't have performance issues. You will. His voice was matter-of-fact, casual, like he was discussing the weather. Or you can be smart. You can convince Jasmine that she misinterpreted our conversation, and we can all move forward as professionals. I stared at him for a long moment. This man who thought my love was something to be ashamed of, who thought he could use my identity as a weapon against me. And then I said the words that sealed my fate. Go to hell. You know what's funny about moments that change your entire life? They don't feel momentous when they're happening. They feel inevitable, like you're finally doing the thing you should have done all along. Walking out of Mr. Thompson's office that morning, I felt lighter than I had in years. I'd finally stood up to him, finally refused to be intimidated or manipulated. I thought I'd won. I was about to learn how naive that was. The call came at 2:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I was in the middle of reviewing the Morrison campaign materials, thinking about how proud I was of the work Jasmine and I had done together. Maya, can you come to my office, please? Mr. Thompson's voice on the phone was perfectly professional, giving nothing away. When I walked in, he wasn't alone. Sandra Martinez from HR was sitting across from his desk, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes sympathetic. My stomach dropped. Please sit down, Mr. Thompson said, gesturing to the chair next to Sandra. I remained standing. What's this about? Sandra cleared her throat. Maya, we've received some concerning reports about your behavior in the workplace. Specifically, allegations of unprofessional conduct, harassment of colleagues, and creating a hostile work environment. The words hit me like physical blows. What? That's not true. Who made these allegations? Mr. Thompson leaned forward, his expression grave with fake concern. Several employees have come forward expressing discomfort with your aggressive behavior, particularly toward management. There have also been reports of inappropriate relationships with subordinates that violate company policy. Subordinates? Jasmine isn't my subordinate, where Ms. Rodriguez reports to the communications team, which falls under your marketing department's purview, Sandra interrupted gently. Technically, there is a hierarchical relationship. My mind was reeling. This was happening too fast. The accusations were too specific, too calculated. I want to see these reports. I want to know who made these allegations. I'm afraid that's confidential, Sandra said. But given the serious nature of these claims and considering your confrontational behavior this morning, confrontational behavior? Mr. Thompson's voice was perfectly calm. Maya, you came into my office this morning making wild accusations, using profanity, creating a scene that could be heard in the hallway. Several employees expressed concern about your emotional stability. The walls were closing in. This was a setup, a masterclass in corporate manipulation, and I was watching my career evaporate in real time. This is retaliation, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. This is because I reported your harassment of Jasmine. Sandra looked confused. Maya, there's no record of any harassment report. When did you file this report? I looked back and forth between them, understanding dawning like a sick joke. I didn't file a formal report. I confronted him directly. So you're saying you took it upon yourself to personally confront a member of senior management based on unsubstantiated allegations? Sandra's pen was moving across her notepad. Without following proper channels or company procedures? I was drowning, and they were the ones holding my head underwater. Maya, Mr. Thompson said, and his voice was almost kind now, almost paternal. I think you're going through some personal issues that are affecting your judgment. And while I sympathize, I can't allow these disruptions to continue affecting team morale and productivity. What are you saying? Sandra closed her folder. Effective immediately, you're being terminated for violation of company policies regarding professional conduct and harassment of management personnel. The room went silent except for the sound of my heart breaking. They gave me 30 minutes to pack my desk. 30 minutes to collect 5 years of my professional life and walk out of that building forever. Security escort included, of course. Can't have the dangerous lesbian causing more disruptions on her way out. I'll never forget that walk through the office. Some colleagues looked away, embarrassed or uncomfortable. Others stared with undisguised curiosity, whispering to each other as I passed. A few offered sympathetic smiles, but no one said anything. No one asked what happened. No one stood up. Except Jasmine. She was waiting by the elevators when I got there, her face pale but determined. The security guard, Mike, who'd always been friendly before, shifted uncomfortably. Maya, she said, and her voice carried clearly across the reception area. I'm so sorry. Ma'am, I need you to step back, Mike said quietly. But Jasmine ignored him. She stepped closer, took the box from my hands, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "This is wrong, and everyone here knows it." People were staring now, really staring. Mr. Thompson had appeared in his doorway, watching the scene unfold with satisfaction. "Jasmine," I whispered, Don't make this worse for yourself." She looked at me with those fierce, beautiful eyes, and I saw the moment she made her choice. Some things are worth the risk. She kissed me. Right there in the lobby of Pinnacle Dynamics, in front of security and gossips and Mr. Thompson himself, she kissed me like her life depended on it. When she pulled back, the lobby was dead silent. "I love you," she said, "and I'm proud of you for standing up to him." The elevator doors opened, and Mike gently guided me inside. The last thing I saw before the doors closed was Jasmine's face, beautiful and defiant, and Mr. Thompson in the background, his expression promising retribution. That night, we sat in our apartment that I could no longer afford, and tried to figure out what came next. I'd been fired from the best job I'd ever had, my reputation was in ruins, and we both knew that Jasmine's days at Pinnacle were numbered. "I should have handled this differently," I said, staring at my laptop screen, scrolling through job listings that might as well have been written in ancient Greek. "I should have been smarter, more strategic." "You should have been supported," Jasmine corrected fiercely. "You should have been believed. You should have worked for people who gave a damn about doing the right thing. But now what? How do I explain to potential employers why I was fired? How do I prove that I'm not the problem when the only references I have are from a company that just branded me as a liability? Jasmine was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that changed everything. Maybe we're asking the wrong question. What do you mean? Maybe instead of asking how we move forward, we should be asking how we make sure this never happens to anyone else again. Have you ever had one of those moments where someone says something so simple, so obvious, that you can't believe you didn't think of it yourself? That was me, sitting in my pajamas at 11 p.m., staring at Jasmine like she'd just handed me the key to the universe. What are you suggesting? She leaned forward, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. I'm suggesting that Richard Thompson has been getting away with this behavior for years because his victims stayed isolated, stayed quiet, stayed scared. But what if they didn't? What if someone finally connected the dots? The next few days were a blur of research, phone calls, and careful detective work. Jasmine was risking her job every day she stayed at Pinnacle, but she was our inside source, our way of identifying other potential victims. And God, there were so many. Lisa Chen from accounting, who'd left suddenly last year after working late with Mr. Thompson on a special project. She was now working at a smaller firm for significantly less money, and when I called her, she was initially hesitant to talk. I don't want to get involved in any drama, she said carefully. Lisa, this isn't drama. This is about holding someone accountable for a pattern of abuse. There was a long pause. What do you mean, pattern? When I told her about Jasmine's experience, about my firing, about what we suspected, she went quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. He told me that my performance review would depend on how flexible I could be about working relationships, she finally said, her voice barely audible. When I asked what he meant, he said that career advancement required building the right kind of trust with management. Did he touch you? He tried. I managed to get out of there, but the next week I was written up for insubordination. A month later, I was given the choice to resign or be fired. 2 down. How many more were out there? Rebecca Williams, former marketing coordinator, now working retail because she couldn't get another office job with the reference Mr. Thompson had given her. Sarah Park, who'd filed a complaint with HR 2 years ago that had somehow disappeared from her personnel file. Jennifer Martinez, who'd been demoted after refusing to attend mandatory weekend meetings at Mr. Thompson's house. Each woman had a story. Each woman had been systematically destroyed by a man who understood exactly how to weaponize corporate policies and social stigma to silence his victims. But here's what Mr. Thompson hadn't counted on. He'd never face someone who had nothing left to lose. By the end of that first week, Jasmine and I had documented cases going back 4 years. We had emails, we had witness statements, we had a pattern of behavior so clear and consistent that even the most skeptical person would have to admit something was wrong. The question was, what did we do with it? We need to go public, I said, sitting at our kitchen table surrounded by printouts and legal pads covered in notes. Internal reporting obviously doesn't work. They've covered this up before. Are you sure you're ready for that? Jasmine asked gently. Once we go public, there's no taking it back. Our lives, our relationship, everything becomes fair game for scrutiny. I thought about Lisa, working retail after years of building her accounting career. I thought about Rebecca, who'd told me she still had nightmares about that weekend meeting she'd refused to attend. I thought about all the women who were still working at Pinnacle, still vulnerable, still afraid. Yeah, I said. I'm ready. Investigative journalism isn't as glamorous as they make it look in movies. It's a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of phone calls to people who don't want to talk to you, and a lot of sitting in coffee shops trying to convince someone to go on the record with their story. But sometimes you get lucky. Jasmine came home on a Friday evening with something that made my heart race, a USB drive. Please tell me you didn't steal that from the office. I didn't steal anything, she said, but her smile was mischievous. I copied some files that were accidentally left open on a shared drive. Files that probably shouldn't have been accessible to someone at my level. The drive contained email chains going back 3 years. Conversations between Mr. Thompson and other senior managers about problematic employees and managing difficult personalities. References to HR complaints that needed to be handled discreetly. Communications about reference letters that painted departed employees in suspiciously similar negative terms. But the smoking gun was an email thread from 8 months ago between Mr. Thompson and the VP of Human Resources. Sandra, we need to discuss the Lisachin situation. She's threatening to take her harassment allegations outside the company if we don't address them internally. I recommend we offer her a generous severance package in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement. Sandra's response, agreed. This is the 3rd such situation this year. Perhaps we should consider implementing some additional management training. Mr. Thompson's reply, that won't be necessary. I'll handle my team my way. Just make sure the NDAs are airtight. 3 situations in 1 year. 3 women bought off and silenced. How many others had there been? But we needed more than emails. We needed sources willing to go on the record, and that meant convincing women who'd already been traumatized to relive their experiences in front of cameras and reporters. The breakthrough came when I reached out to Amanda Foster, who'd worked at Pinnacle 5 years ago. She was now a successful consultant with her own firm, financially secure enough to weather any potential backlash. I've been waiting for someone to ask me about Richard Thompson for years, she said when I called her. I'll tell you everything. Amanda's story was the worst one yet. Mr. Thompson had cornered her in a hotel room during a business conference, had made it clear that her job depended on her compliance, and when she'd threatened to report him, he'd systematically destroyed her reputation within the company. But here's the thing, Maya, she said. I kept everything. Every email, every performance review, every piece of documentation from my time there. I always knew this day would come. With Amanda's evidence and testimony, we had a case that no one could ignore or dismiss. But we still needed the right platform, the right journalist who would take this story seriously and see it through to the end. That's when Jasmine suggested Marcus Rivera. Marcus Rivera was a senior investigative reporter for the Chicago Tribune, known for his coverage of corporate malfeasance and workplace rights issues. He'd won a Pulitzer 2 years earlier for exposing wage theft in the hospitality industry, and he had a reputation for being thorough, fair, and absolutely relentless when he smelled corruption. He was also, according to his bio, a proud father of 3 daughters and an advocate for workplace equality. Our first meeting was at a diner on the South Side, away from downtown where we might be recognized. I'd expected someone intimidating, maybe a little cynical, but Marcus was surprisingly warm, the kind of person who looked at you when you talked like you were the most interesting person in the room. Tell me why you think this story matters, he said after I'd given him the basic outline of our allegations. Because it's not just about Richard Thompson, I said. It's about a system that protects predators and punishes victims. It's about how companies use legal mechanisms and financial pressure to silence women who speak up. It's about how many talented, capable people have had their careers destroyed by men who see them as objects instead of colleagues. He nodded, taking notes. And you're prepared for the scrutiny this will bring? The legal challenges, the character assassination, the attempts to discredit you personally. Jasmine reached across the table and took my hand. We're prepared. What about your relationship? You realize that'll become part of the story. There will be people who try to frame this as some kind of lover's revenge plot rather than a legitimate harassment case. Let them try, I said. Love isn't something to be ashamed of. And if our relationship somehow invalidates the experiences of 8 other women, then the problem isn't with us. It's with a system that's so broken it can't recognize truth when it's staring them in the face. Marcus smiled. I like you. Both of you. And I think you're right, this story needs to be told. But I need you to understand what you're signing up for. Once I start digging, once this gets published, your lives are going to change permanently. Are you absolutely certain you want to do this? I thought about Lisa Chin, working retail. I thought about Rebecca Williams, afraid to even try for another office job. I thought about the women still working at Pinnacle, still vulnerable, still afraid. I'm certain. What none of us knew was that Mr. Thompson had his own sources, his own network of people keeping an eye on potential threats to his empire. What none of us knew was that he was already 3 steps ahead of us, already preparing his counterattack. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks into Marcus's investigation. I was making coffee when my phone rang, unknown number, but I answered anyway. Maya Chin. The voice was unfamiliar, professional, cold. Yes? This is David Kowalski, attorney for Pinnacle Dynamics and Richard Thompson. We need to talk. There's something deeply unsettling about receiving a call from a lawyer when you haven't done anything illegal. It's like being pulled over by police when you know you weren't speeding, that immediate surge of adrenaline and the nagging voice asking, "What do they know that I don't?" Mr. Kowalski, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What can I do for you? I think you know why I'm calling, Ms. Chen. My clients are aware of your recent activities regarding false and defamatory allegations against Mr. Thompson and Pinnacle Dynamics. My coffee mug slipped from my hands, shattering on the kitchen floor. I'm sorry, what? Let me be very clear. His voice was smooth, practiced, the voice of someone who'd made these kinds of calls before. Any publication of unsubstantiated claims against my clients will result in immediate legal action for defamation, libel, and tortious interference with business relationships. The damages we'll seek will be substantial, enough to ensure you never recover financially. I was gripping the phone so hard my knuckles were white. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you of the legal consequences of your actions. But Maya, may I call you Maya, I'm also here to offer you an alternative. What kind of alternative? My clients are prepared to offer you a generous settlement in exchange for your agreement to cease all defamatory activities and sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. We're talking about enough money to set you up very comfortably while you transition to a new career. How much? $200,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $200,000. More money than I'd ever seen at one time, enough to pay off my student loans, cover rent for years, maybe even start my own business. There is one additional condition, Kowalski continued. You would need to convince the other women involved in this conspiracy to accept similar arrangements. It's not a conspiracy. It's the truth. Ms. Chin, let me share something with you that might help you make an informed decision. My clients have been conducting their own investigation into your background, your relationship with Ms. Rodriguez, and the circumstances surrounding your termination. My blood turned to ice. What are you talking about? Did you know that your college roommate Jennifer Walsh has some very interesting photos from your senior year? Photos that might be quite embarrassing if they were to surface at an inopportune time? I remembered Jennifer, remembered that party, remembered being drunk and stupid and 21. The photos weren't illegal, but they were compromising, personal. The kind of thing that could be taken out of context and used to paint me as unprofessional, unreliable, unfit for corporate life. You're bluffing. Am I? What about your father's tax situation from 2019? Those business deductions that might not have been entirely legitimate? Or your brother Michael's arrest record that was sealed when he was a juvenile but could be unsealed with the right legal pressure? They weren't just coming after me. They were going after my family, people who had nothing to do with this situation, but could be destroyed as collateral damage in Mr. Thompson's war to protect his reputation. You son of a bitch. Miss Chin, please understand, my clients don't want to pursue any of these avenues. They simply want this unfortunate misunderstanding to be resolved quietly and permanently. The choice is entirely yours. I hung up on him. The phone rang again immediately. I let it go to voicemail, but I could hear Kowalski's voice through the speaker. You have 48 hours to consider our offer, Ms. Chen. After that, we'll assume you've chosen the more difficult path. I sank to the floor next to the broken coffee mug, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial Jasmine's number. Maya? What's wrong? They know, I whispered. They know everything, and they're going to destroy us. That night was the longest of my life. Jasmine came home early from work. She'd used a sick day, claimed she had food poisoning, and we sat on our couch trying to figure out what to do. Maybe we should take the money, she said quietly, and I could hear the defeat in her voice. Maybe this fight is bigger than we are. I wanted to agree with her. God, I wanted to take that $200,000 and disappear, start over somewhere else, leave Richard Thompson to terrorize other women while we built a quiet, safe life together. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lisa Chen's face. Rebecca Williams. Amanda Foster. All the women who'd been silenced by exactly this kind of intimidation, this calculated campaign of financial pressure and personal destruction. What if we're the only chance they have? I asked. What if we walk away and he does this to someone else next month, next year? What if that someone doesn't have our resources, our support system, our privilege? What privilege? Jasmine laughed bitterly. Maya, we're two queer women going up against a multi-million-dollar corporation and their army of lawyers. We don't have privilege, we have targets on our backs. She was right, of course. But something Marcus Rivera had said kept echoing in my mind. The story needs to be told. At 3 a.m., unable to sleep, I found myself at my laptop, typing out an email to Marcus. Marcus, they're trying to silence us with legal threats and financial bribes. They've done background checks on my family, found things they can use as weapons. I know this makes me a liability to your story, and I'll understand if you want to back out. But I need you to know, everything we told you is true. Every woman we connected you with is telling the truth. And if we don't stand up now, it'll never stop. I stared at the screen for a long time before hitting send. His response came back within an hour. Maya, I've been doing this for 15 years. This is exactly what powerful people do when they're scared. The fact that they're trying so hard to stop this story tells me we're onto something big. Don't let them win. The Tribune has excellent legal representation, and we don't back down from bullies. I woke Jasmine up and showed her the email. She read it twice, then looked at me with those beautiful, fierce eyes. Okay, she said. Let's finish this. We called David Kowalski the next morning. Mr. Kowalski? This is Maya Chin. I've considered your offer. Excellent. I'll have the paperwork drawn up immediately. I'm calling to tell you that you and your clients can go to hell. Ms. Chin, I think you're making a very serious mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. And David? When your investigation into my background turns up those college photos, make sure to include the context. They were taken at a fundraiser for LGBTQ+ youth services. I'm actually quite proud of them. I hung up on him again. This time, when he called back, I didn't answer. The article went live on a Thursday morning at 6 a.m. Marcus had titled it Silent Thunder, How Pinnacle Dynamics Protected a Predator and Silenced His Victims. I'll never forget reading it for the first time, seeing our story, my story, Jasmine's story, the stories of 8 brave women, laid out in black and white, professional and undeniable. Marcus had done his job brilliantly. He'd corroborated every allegation, included responses from Pinnacle Dynamics, generic denials and attacks on the credibility of the sources, and painted a picture of systematic corporate malfeasance that was impossible to ignore. By 8 a.m., the article had been shared over 10,000 times. By noon, it was trending on social media. By evening, it had been picked up by national news outlets. My phone started ringing at 6:15 a.m. and didn't stop for 3 days. Maya, this is Patricia Williams from CNN. We'd like to invite you for an interview about your experiences at Pinnacle Dynamics. Ms. Chin, this is Sarah Martinez from Good Morning America. We're doing a segment on workplace harassment and would love to have you as a guest. Maya, this is David Chin, no relation, from the Employment Rights Foundation. We'd like to discuss potential legal action against Pinnacle Dynamics. But the most important call came from someone I'd never expected to hear from, Richard Thompson himself. You have no idea what you've done. His voice was shaking with rage when I answered the phone. "You've destroyed everything I've worked for, everything I've built." "Good," I said simply. "This isn't over, Maya. You think you've won, but I have resources you can't imagine. I have connections, I have money, you have nothing," I interrupted. "You have no power over me anymore. You have no power over any of us anymore." "We'll see about that." But I was right, and he was wrong. Within a week, the Pinnacle Dynamics Board of Directors had placed Mr. Thompson on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Within 2 weeks, 3 more women had come forward with their own stories. Within a month, he'd been terminated, and the company had announced a complete overhaul of their HR policies and management training programs. The lawsuits started flying in both directions. Pinnacle sued us for defamation. We countersued for wrongful termination and harassment. Amanda Foster filed her own suit for sexual assault and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It was messy, it was expensive, and it was absolutely worth it. 6 months later, I was sitting in the office of my new job, Director of Diversity and Inclusion at a tech startup that actually cared about creating an equitable workplace. Jasmine had found her own position at a progressive nonprofit focused on LGBTQ+ workplace rights. We were different people than we'd been before all this started. Stronger, maybe. Definitely more aware of our own power, our own voices, the impact we could have when we refused to stay silent. "Any regrets?" Jasmine asked me one evening as we sat on our new apartment's balcony, watching the sunset over Chicago. I thought about Lisa Chin, who'd called to thank us and tell us she'd gotten a new job at a company that valued her skills and treated her with respect. I thought about Rebecca Williams, who'd started her own consulting firm and was thriving. I thought about the scholarship fund we'd established for LGBTQ+ students pursuing business degrees. I thought about the women who were still out there, still fighting their own battles against their own Richard Thompsons, who might see our story and realize they weren't alone. "No," I said. "No regrets. You see, thunder isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet rumble that builds slowly, the pressure that accumulates until something has to give. Sometimes the most powerful thunder is the kind that starts as a whisper and grows into a roar that can't be ignored." My name is Maya Chin, and this was my silent thunder. But it's not just my story. It belongs to everyone who's ever been told to stay quiet, to not make waves, to accept the unacceptable. Your thunder is building too. I can hear it. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own experiences or the experiences of people you love, please hit that subscribe button. Share this video. Start conversations. Because the only way we change the world is by refusing to let the thunder stay silent. The storm isn't over. It's just getting started. And we're going to make sure everyone hears it.